There is something you need to hear before you make any assumptions about what happened. Your soulmate may have recently had a private conversation with someone who is much closer to you than you realize. It could be a friend, a relative, a mutual connection, a coworker, or someone who has quietly observed your journey from the sidelines. And the most interesting part is this. The conversation was about you. Not casually. Not because your name happened to come up. They were trying to understand something about you. Something they could not understand on their own. Something they had been thinking about for much longer than they wanted anyone to know. Your soulmate may have been carrying questions, emotions, doubts, and memories that they simply couldn't keep inside anymore. So instead of coming directly to you, they chose someone close to you. And what happened during that conversation may explain why their behavior has recently felt different. Maybe they have become quieter. Maybe they suddenly started watching from a distance. Maybe they stopped saying certain things. Maybe they seem curious about where you are, what you're doing, or whether you have moved on. Maybe they asked questions that appeared completely random. But they weren't random. There was a reason. And today, we're going to explore what that conversation may have been about. Not as a claim that we can literally know someone's private thoughts, but as a powerful relationship story about the possibilities behind a secret conversation. So stay with this message, because the most important part comes later. Your soulmate may not have gone to that person to talk about someone else. They may have gone there because they didn't know how to talk to you. The first question was about you. Imagine your soulmate sitting across from someone who knows you well. At first, the conversation may have been normal. Small talk. Everyday topics. Nothing that would make anyone suspicious. But eventually, your name entered the conversation. And when it did, something changed. Their tone became different. Their questions became more specific. They weren't simply asking, "How is he?" or "How is she?" They may have asked something deeper. Has he changed? Does she still think about me? Is he seeing someone? Does she ever mention me? Do you think she hates me? Why did everything become so complicated? Those aren't ordinary questions. Those are questions from someone who still has an emotional connection to the situation. Your soulmate may have been trying to collect information without revealing how deeply they still care. And the person they were speaking to may have noticed it immediately. Because sometimes the questions someone asks reveal more than the answers they give. Your soulmate could have tried to sound calm. They could have pretended that they were simply curious. But the person sitting across from them may have thought, "Why do you care this much if you're really over them?" That may have been the moment the conversation became uncomfortable. Because your soulmate's emotions were becoming harder to hide. They wanted to know if you had moved on. One of the strongest possibilities is that your soulmate wanted to know whether you had moved forward with your life. This doesn't necessarily mean they wanted to control you. It could simply mean they were afraid. Afraid that while they were still processing everything, you had already closed the door. They may have asked, "Is there someone else?" And perhaps the person close to you didn't answer immediately. That silence alone could have told your soulmate something. Maybe they started asking more questions. Are they happy? Do they talk about relationships? Have they mentioned me recently? What do they say about what happened between us? Suddenly, the conversation wasn't about casual curiosity anymore. It was about emotional uncertainty. Your soulmate may have been trying to determine whether there was still a possibility of repairing something that had been damaged. And here's where things become interesting. They may not have asked directly because direct questions require vulnerability. If they contacted you and asked, "Do you still care about me?" they would have to expose themselves. But if they ask someone close to you, they can hide behind curiosity. They can pretend they're only asking. They can protect their pride. And sometimes pride is exactly what keeps two people from having the conversation they actually need. They talked about your past. Another part of the conversation may have involved something that happened between you in the past. Maybe there was a misunderstanding. Maybe something was said that was never properly explained. Maybe your soulmate remembers a moment differently than you do. Maybe they regret the way they handled something. And perhaps they finally admitted that regret. They may have said, "I know I made mistakes. I didn't understand them at the time. I should have handled things differently. I didn't know what I was feeling. I thought I was protecting myself." Those words may have been difficult for them to say. Because admitting regret means admitting that their decisions had consequences. And perhaps they are beginning to understand those consequences now. Sometimes distance gives people clarity. When you're close to a situation, emotions can be overwhelming. You react. You defend yourself. You become stubborn. You say things you don't mean. But after time passes, memories become clearer. You begin remembering the good moments. The conversations. The laughter. The small things. The way that person understood you. The way they looked at you. The way they made ordinary moments feel important. And your soulmate may have started remembering those things. That's why they needed someone close to you. They wanted to know whether those memories mattered to you too. Then they asked the question they were afraid to ask. At some point, the conversation may have become more personal. Your soulmate may have lowered their voice. Paused. Thought carefully. And then asked, "Do you think I still have a chance?" That question changes everything. Because people don't usually ask about a second chance unless the idea has already been living inside their mind. Maybe they didn't say it exactly like that. Maybe they said, "Do you think they would ever talk to me again?" Or, "Would it be weird if I reached out?" Or, "Do you think they've forgiven me?" Different words. Same emotion. Fear. Your soulmate may have been afraid of rejection. Afraid you would ignore them. Afraid you would respond coldly. Afraid you had become a completely different person. And perhaps the person close to you gave them an answer they weren't expecting. Maybe they said, "If you really want to know, you should talk to them yourself." That sentence may have stayed in your soulmate's mind. Because sometimes we spend weeks searching for answers from everyone except the one person who actually has them. They may have heard something about your strength. There is another possibility that makes this conversation even more meaningful. The person close to you may have described how much you've changed. They may have said that you're not the same person you were before. That you've become stronger. More independent. More focused. More careful with your emotions. Maybe your soulmate expected you to remain exactly where they left you. But they may have discovered that life continued. You continued. You grew. You learned. You healed. And that realization can be powerful. Because sometimes someone doesn't realize your value until they understand that you don't need them to keep moving forward. Your soulmate may have discovered that you aren't sitting around waiting for them. And that may have created a completely different kind of urgency. Not desperation. Not obsession. Simply realization. If I want to be part of their life again, I can't keep waiting forever. They asked about your heart. This may have been the most difficult part of the conversation. Your soulmate may have wanted to know whether your heart was still open. But they couldn't ask you directly. So they asked someone who might know. Do they still have feelings? The person close to you may have hesitated. Because that's not an easy question to answer. Your emotions belong to you. Nobody else can completely know what is happening inside your heart. But perhaps they shared what they had observed. Maybe they said, "They don't talk about you much." And your soulmate misunderstood that silence. Maybe they thought it meant you no longer cared. But silence doesn't always mean indifference. Sometimes silence means healing. Sometimes it means someone has learned not to explain their deepest emotions to everyone. Sometimes silence means, "I care, but I don't know whether it's safe to care anymore." And your soulmate may have started wondering whether your silence was actually a form of protection. Then your soulmate may have revealed their own feelings. This is where the conversation may have become unexpectedly honest. Your soulmate may have finally admitted something. Perhaps they said, "I still think about them." That sentence can sound simple. But imagine how difficult it can be for someone to admit that to another person. Especially if they have been pretending for months that everything is fine. Maybe they said they had tried to move on. Maybe they tried to distract themselves. Maybe they met new people. Maybe they focused on work. Maybe they stayed busy. But somehow, your memory kept returning. Not every day. Not necessarily dramatically. Sometimes through the smallest things. A song. A place. A familiar phrase. A random memory. A photograph. A date. A smell. A conversation. And suddenly, they remember you. They may have told the person close to you that they don't understand why they still feel connected. And perhaps that person gave them an answer. Maybe because you never really finished the conversation. That statement may have hit differently. Because unresolved emotions don't always disappear. Sometimes they wait. They wait until you're ready to understand them. They may have talked about why you two drifted apart. Perhaps your soulmate also wanted to understand what went wrong. Was it timing? Pride? Miscommunication? Fear? Outside influence? Bad decisions? Emotional immaturity? Sometimes two people can care about each other and still hurt each other. Love alone doesn't automatically create perfect communication. People carry their own fears. Their own insecurities. Their own history. Your soulmate may have started recognizing their role in what happened. Maybe they realized they were too defensive. Maybe they didn't communicate. Maybe they assumed things instead of asking. Maybe they allowed other people's opinions to influence them. Maybe they walked away because staying required courage they didn't have at the time. And now they may be looking back differently. Not necessarily because everything was perfect. But because time has changed their perspective. The person close to you may have given them a warning. But here's something important. The person they spoke with may not have simply encouraged them to come back. They may have warned them. They may have said, "If you're going to contact them, don't do it unless you're serious." That matters. Because coming back just because you feel lonely isn't the same as coming back with genuine intention. Maybe the person close to you told them, "Don't reopen their wounds unless you've changed. Don't contact them just because you miss them. Don't promise something you can't give. Don't expect everything to return to the way it was." Those words may have forced your soulmate to think deeply. Because perhaps they weren't being asked whether they missed you. They were being asked whether they were prepared to treat you differently. And that is a much bigger question. Your soulmate may have realized something about you. They may have realized that you aren't waiting for an apology forever. You aren't begging for explanations. You aren't chasing. You aren't trying to convince anyone of your worth. You've changed the way you approach relationships. And that may have made your soulmate see you differently. Sometimes absence doesn't create love. It creates clarity. It removes the noise. It allows people to recognize what was actually important. Your soulmate may have realized that what they once considered ordinary was actually rare. Your attention was rare. Your loyalty was rare. Your patience was rare. Your presence was rare. And when someone loses access to something valuable, they sometimes finally understand its value. But what happened after the conversation? This is the part you should pay attention to. After speaking with someone close to you, your soulmate may have left with more questions than answers. They may have started thinking about contacting you. They may have opened your chat. Looked at your name. Typed something. Deleted it. Typed again. Deleted it again. Maybe they wondered. Should I say hello? What if they don't respond? What if they have moved on? What if they ask why I'm back? What if they don't believe me? What if I hurt them again? And then they may have stopped. Not because they don't care, but because fear can be powerful. A person can miss you deeply and still struggle to take the first step. That's why you shouldn't measure someone's feelings only by whether they have contacted you yet. Feelings and actions are different things. What ultimately matters is what someone chooses to do with those feelings. Don't chase the mystery. If you believe this message connects with your situation, don't let it make you obsess over every little sign. Don't spend your day trying to figure out who your soulmate talked to. Don't accuse friends. Don't confront people without evidence. Don't turn uncertainty into conflict. Instead, let this message encourage something healthier. If there is unfinished communication, allow it to reveal itself naturally. If someone wants to speak with you, they can choose to reach out. And if they do, judge the conversation by their honesty and consistency, not simply by emotional words. Because someone saying, "I miss you," is meaningful. But someone saying, "I understand what I did wrong, and I'm willing to change," is different. Actions tell you what words cannot. The conversation may have been a turning point. Perhaps your soulmate didn't leave that meeting with a plan. Perhaps they simply left with something they had been missing. Perspective. They may have heard your name from someone who truly knows you. They may have heard how much you've grown. They may have heard that you're doing better. They may have heard that you don't speak badly about them. And that last detail could have affected them deeply. Because when someone expects anger but hears respect instead, it can create reflection. Maybe they expected you to hate them. Instead, they discovered that you simply chose peace. And peace can be more powerful than anger. Anger keeps people connected to the past. Peace allows you to release it. Your soulmate may have realized that if they ever return, they cannot expect the old version of you to welcome them. They would have to meet the new you. The healed you. The stronger you. The version of you that now understands boundaries. And perhaps that's exactly what they need to understand. What should you do now? Don't wait beside your phone. Don't decode every notification. Don't assume every song, number, dream, or random coincidence is proof that someone is coming back. Instead, keep living. Keep growing. Keep becoming the person you want to be. If your soulmate genuinely wants another conversation, let them demonstrate that through respectful action. And if they reach out, don't rush. Listen. Ask questions. Pay attention. You don't have to immediately forgive everything. You don't have to immediately restart the relationship. You don't have to pretend nothing happened. You are allowed to move slowly. You are allowed to protect your peace. And you are allowed to decide whether someone belongs in your future based on who they are now, not simply who they were when you loved them. And maybe that's what this secret conversation was really about. Maybe the person close to you wasn't simply telling your soulmate information. Maybe they were giving them perspective. Maybe they were reminding them that you are a real person with real emotions. That you experienced the separation too. That you had to heal too. That while they were trying to understand their feelings, you were learning how to live without depending on their presence. And perhaps your soulmate finally understood something. You cannot lose someone and expect them to remain exactly where you left them. People evolve. Hearts change. Priorities change. And if two people ever find their way back to each other, they cannot simply recreate the past. They have to build something new. Something healthier. Something more honest. Something where communication replaces assumptions. Where courage replaces avoidance. Where consistency replaces temporary emotion. Where respect replaces fear. So if your soulmate really did have a private conversation with someone close to you, perhaps the most important thing they talked about wasn't your past. It was your future. They may have been trying to understand whether there is still a door open. But only you can decide whether that door should ever be opened. And if someone truly wants to walk through it, they should not come with empty promises. They should come with clarity. They should come with accountability. They should come ready to communicate. They should come ready to respect the person you've become. Because the real question isn't, does your soulmate still think about you? The real question is, what are they willing to do about it? And that answer cannot be discovered through rumors. It cannot be found through guessing. It cannot be forced. It can only be revealed through action. So breathe. Stay grounded. Keep your heart open to healthy possibilities, but keep your boundaries strong. Maybe that secret conversation happened. Maybe your name was mentioned. Maybe questions were asked. Maybe someone finally admitted that they still care. But whatever happens next, don't abandon yourself while waiting for someone else to make a decision. Your life is happening right now. Your growth is happening right now. Your future is happening right now. And if someone from your past wants to become part of that future, let them prove that they understand the value of what they once had. Because sometimes the most important conversation happens privately. But the truth of that conversation is eventually revealed publicly, through behavior. So don't chase the secret. Don't force the answer. Let time reveal what words have hidden. And if the person who secretly met someone close to you really was talking about you, then perhaps their next conversation won't be with that person. Perhaps, when they're finally ready, their next conversation will be with you.